to remember to hold Elaine up in prayer. She heads off to Kenya on Saturday for the mission trip that God's called her to, that each of us have had a part in. Even if you can't go on that trip, you're there. You're a part of it because she's a part of us. So just be remembering that's a long flight and a long week's mission. So hold our team up, our Mid-Atlantic District team that's going to Kenya. I'm going to ask for permission this morning, all right? I'm looking at the clock. It says it's 6 minutes till noon. Will you give me the 20 or 25 minutes that I need, or should we check out now? Okay. Because you all have to stay with me. It's not the other way around. I've been touched this week by the story in Genesis chapter 28 of Jacob on the journey. If you know, I was supposed to preach about Jacob last week. The Lord had other plans. Jacob makes this journey through the book of Genesis. It's kind of a winding journey. It has twists and turns and plot issues and all kinds of things that somehow and for some reason I particularly, it speaks to me. I see touch points in my life from it, and this morning is no different. I remember a day in Nashville, Tennessee. It happened to be early in the morning, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I was wrestling with a philosophy class. It happened to be medieval philosophy. The book that I was trying to understand was by a gentleman by the name of Immanuel Kant. And I know you're going to want to run out and get this book. The title of the book was A Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. That's right. It got a whole lot worse after the title. And there was a lot going on in life. And I was trying to study that book that night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, by a method called osmosis. And if you're not a student of higher learning, osmosis goes something like this. You take the book that you're trying to read, and you put it across your face and close your eyes, hoping that which is inside the book will somehow kind of transfer into your head, because I knew that later on, that very same day, I had a paper that I had to turn in on that book. And I'd like to say that particular day that a prolegomena to any future metaphysics was all that I was wrestling with in my journey, but there were some other things going on. I think I've probably alluded to them before, but the upshot of it is, at the end of that term, unless something happened, I was leaving Trevecca Nazarene University because of financial aid and some things like that, and I was 3 semesters, 3 quarters from being done. This was fall of my senior year, and I was finishing up the next July, and I didn't see any way out of it. And I was frustrated. Because if I were up to what I wanted to do, you all wouldn't know me today, because I was going to go to Montana State University, way out Montana State University, to become a wildlife biologist. Because at that point in my life, and I'm still not sure that I do, but at that particular point in my life, I didn't like people much. And I'm not sure that I like church people a whole lot then either. But somewhere along the way, God spoke into my life and called me to ministry, and made that way possible. And here at the end of my senior year, when I could just literally see the end, it was all falling apart. And it wasn't like I was a bad student. I was never remotely close to academic probation, but an individual got in the way, and it looked like my college career was going to end 2 terms short of graduation. So I found myself up that night, as I often do when I'm struggling, and sometimes I'm pacing the floor, Sometimes I have a prolegomena to any future metaphysics laying across my face. I remember I spent a significant amount of that night in the bathtub with the book, trying to stay awake to read it, all the while wrestling with God. How is it you've brought me to this point in my life, called me to your ministry? I'm preparing for you to turn away from me. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever had one of those wandering wilderness kind of experiences where you felt like even though you were walking somewhere, you might not quite be sure where that was, or maybe you were even running away? Not sure where you were going, just away. And then in your running, somehow, God had overlooked the situation in which you found yourself. That's precisely where Jacob is in the 28th chapter of the book of Genesis. Just to give you the quick overview, Jacob had a twin brother. His name was Esau. Jacob and Esau could not have been more different had they come from separate mothers, but they came from the same mother. You see, they were twins. One was the rugged, rough, tough, outdoors kind of guy. He was really hairy. He was the one that had hair down his back and arms. And he liked to hunt and fish and jump and run and tangle with snakes. He was a man's man. Jacob, on the other hand, wasn't. He liked to stay close to home. He liked to cook. If he had cable TV, the Food Channel would be his favorite show. He hung around with his mother. He was kind of a fairly complected boy. He was mommy's boy, where Esau was daddy's boy. And from the get-go, Esau and Jacob have this strained relationship in their family. Because Jacob isn't the number one son, he's the number two son. And in the society today, if you were number two son, well, you weren't much count. It didn't get you anything. The birthright, the inheritance, the blessing, it all went to Esau. But one particular day, Esau came in from hunting and he was famished. He'd been burning calories like crazy. He came in as only a guy can understand. Guys, have you ever been to the place where you're just flat starving to death? Okay, now look at us for a minute. Not too many of us are really starving to death, but you feel like that. And Esau came in from the hunt and he felt like he was just going to keel flat over dead if he didn't get something to eat. So Jacob saw an opportunity. And because of Esau's diminished physical capabilities and his superior intellect, and he was a better chef than Emeril Lagasse, he said, I'll tell you what, Esau, I'll give you some of this stew that I'm making if you sell me your birthright. Jacob found himself in exactly the right place to take advantage of his brother's weakness and get ahead in the world. And he did. And a little bit later, he found himself in the same situation as his father was getting ready to pass from this earth. And it was a custom then that you blessed your son. And it was more than just good words, well done, son. There was a spiritual thing to it. And it was just a whole life blessing. And Jacob robbed Esau of his blessing. Now, there's not too many things in life that I know happen, but if you mess with the guy who's bigger than you, and stronger than you, and rougher than you, and tougher than you, and has I almost said a badder temper than you, you're in for a beating. And it says in Genesis chapter 27 that Esau was so angry that he took comfort in the idea of killing his brother Jacob. He was so angry, the only way he could make sense out of it was creating scenarios where he could wring the living life out of Jacob. But Jacob's mother, Rebekah, found out about it. And you mothers know everything, don't they? Come on, moms, I threw you a bone there, right? Mothers know everything, right? Especially when things aren't right between the boys. And now remember, Jacob was her favorite. She said, Jacob, you need to know something. You're in deep, deep trouble here because your brother Esau is dreaming about and scheming to take your life. so I want you to run away. I've got a brother way out in the wilderness. His name's Laban. I want you to go to your Uncle Laban's house. Oh, and by the way, he's got some daughters there, and boys and girls can do what boys and girls do, and you can find yourself a good Hebrew wife, but you can get away from Esau. And where we see Jacob in chapter 28 of the book of Genesis is on this journey to a land far away. He's left behind home. He's left behind family. He's left behind his tent. He's left behind any wealth that he had. He's left behind the safety of the group, and out in the wilderness, out in the middle of nowhere, there he sits at night. Have you ever been in the woods at night? Here in about 5 weeks, I'm going on a trip. For those of you who don't know, the 25th of next month, I'm going bear hunting for a week. And I'll be in the woods in Maine. Now, I've done this before. It's one of my favorite things to do. But I'll just confess to you a little bit. There's something more than a little creepy about sitting in the woods all by yourself at night, knowing that 20 yards from you is a bear's dinner table. That's where Jacob was, by himself, in the wilderness, with nobody to watch out, nobody to protect, fleeing literally for his life, and trying to make sense out of it all at night. Now, Jacob must have been a better man than I am, because he was able to do something I don't think I could do in the woods at night, in the wilderness at night, with lions and tigers and bears and scorpions and snakes. Oh my. He was able to go to sleep. He was able to go to sleep out in the middle of nowhere, where nobody knew where he was, in a place that until this event in Genesis doesn't really even have a name. And he's an outcast. He's got no right to be anyone, to be anywhere other than where he was. But on that night, the outcast, who was asleep, in other words, he had no power, no control, no ability except to dream. And it's in this unexpected place, in unexpected circumstances, to an unexpected person, God shows up and speaks so clearly, so powerfully. Now, the temptation is to get caught up in the dream of Jacob's ladder, but you need to just know something really quickly. There's not a whole lot there other than, you know what a ladder does? Who knows what a ladder does? It's really technical. A ladder connects a low place to a high place. That's what a ladder does. It connects a low place to a high place. Well, we got these lovely stage lights that keep me from seeing you most of the time up here. Every now and then, they just went out. They have bulbs up in there, and every now and then those bulbs go out. Do you know they don't change themselves? No, they don't miraculously. Somebody has to get that big ladder, wherever it happens to be stored right now, and bring it in here and set it up and climb up there and unscrew the bulb after they let it cool off appropriately because they're very hot, and change that light bulb. Because the ladder connects the floor to the ceiling. That's exactly what's going on in Jacob's dream. There's this ladder that connects the high place of heaven with earth. In other words, heaven has come down in that night to where Jacob the outcast is, where Jacob the wanderer is connected from heaven above with the ladder. And the angels, and don't think little wingy thingies, okay? That's not what an angel is. An angel is the messenger of the Lord, and they climb the ladder, and they come down the ladder, and they let Jacob know in this dream that God is with you. You see, heaven is where God is, and God is with Jacob. And in the middle of this dream, and it's not so important what he sees as what he hears. Because from the ladder, from the stairway, God speaks. And God says three things. And the three things are the three things that I want you to hear this morning. God says to Jacob, are you ready for this? You might want to write it down. God says to Jacob, I am with you. I am with you. Put yourself on Jacob's stone pillow for a moment. Out in the middle of nowhere without a campfire, maybe a star in the sky, maybe not, nobody around, just creepy, crawly, crickety things, and God says, I am with you. God says, I am with you. The message of Scripture, the message of the Bible, the message of God's revelation to Jacob and to us today is, I am with you. In this unexpected place, with these unexpected events, where everybody has turned away, I am with you. I'm with you. The one who, by the way, just a few chapters in the book of Genesis, we'll find out his name is I am. I am with you. On the ladder, God's messages are coming up and down, and Jacob hears these words that mean so much. I am with you. God has come to earth. If you've ever been in the woods at night, there's a really cool thing when you realize you're not alone. If it's somebody else that's with you, it's almost bearable. Because someone else is there to share the weight of whatever it is that you're going through. God is with you. God is present with this cheating, running, wayward son who's in the middle of nowhere. God's there. This one who's without a home, without a family, without a people, without a guarantee of anything. God's there. God has entered into Jacob's world to remind him of this powerful truth. God is there. Despite all the evidence understand, nothing has changed about Jacob's circumstances. He's still laying in the wilderness with a stone pillow to put his head on, cold, darker than midnight. Nothing's changed, except he's aware that God is there. Despite all evidence to the contrary, the outcast has not been abandoned by God. What good news that must have been. When you think you're alone, to find out you're not alone at all. God is with you. Then God says the second thing. Jacob, I'm with you. Then he says, I will keep you. I am with you, and I will keep you. Now, there's a picture, and this is a beautiful picture for what God said. You see, Jacob is being reminded by God, even though he thinks he's alone, even though his life is in tumult, even though there's all kinds of ugly circumstances in his life, he's not alone, and God is actively at work in his life, shepherding Jacob. Sheep get kept. Anybody ever worked with sheep? My wife has. You don't chase sheep. Sheep don't get chased. Well, cows you can chase, because cows, they'll get all together and they'll just run. Do you know what happens if you try to chase sheep? It looks like a bomb goes off in a barrel of oatmeal. Sheep go everywhere. They scatter because they don't have that central core to bring them back together. And the shepherd knows that. So the shepherd calls, and the shepherd leads. He provides for them the nutrition that they need to get healthy and grow all woolly and fuzzy. The shepherd takes care of them because sheep are an easy dinner for a wolf or a tiger or a lion. The shepherd fends them off. Sheep don't know where to go to find water. They do stupid things like fall off cliffs. But the shepherd is there to keep them, to provide for them, to provide their security and their peace, their hope. I'm not sure there's a more contented animal in the world than a bunch of sheep together with a shepherd who's keeping them. You see, that's what God is saying to Jacob, who's on the backside of nowhere, with no protection and no hope and nothing to guarantee anything except the God who is with him says, Jacob, I will keep you. God is there in the middle of the desert to be Jacob's shepherd, to steer him from trouble, to lead him to places of safety, to provide for his needs. By this amazingly hopeful and creative word, God is reminding Jacob that he, God, is attentive to all of Jacob's needs, even in the light of these crazy, upside-down, senseless circumstances in his life. God is there. To be there, to be present. God is there to keep and to work. But then there's a third promise that God gives Jacob. Say them with me. The first is, Jacob, I am with you. The second is, I will keep you. The third promise is, I will do what I promised your fathers I would do. You see, I'm with you is present. I will keep you is present. I will do what I promised your fathers is future. One guy in the wilderness, all by himself, with no weapon, with no security, not even a good dog to keep him companion, doesn't live long in the desert. But God, who is with him, God, who is working, says, Jacob, I will guarantee your future. I will bless you as I promised your grandfather Abram when I called him to become a people. I will keep the promise that I made to your father Isaac to make a great nation out of you. Jacob, you are the one who the nation will know is the one that I have promised to be a blessing. I will bring your future to pass. Jacob, you will have a homecoming. You will be my people. Think about how powerful that word is in Jacob's dream, as the stone upon which he was lying was sucking the heat from his ear, to know that God says, I'm going to give you who have no home, I'm going to give you who have no people, a homecoming, a reunion, a family, a nation, a future. To the one who has no future, God promises to be that future. Promises to be that hope. He promises to be that blessing. Jacob was alone. He was running for his life. He had no place to call home. No guarantee of safety. He had nothing to base any hope of a future upon, except the God who was with him. The God who was acting on his behalf. The God who promised to guarantee him a blessing. To the man who had nothing, God promised to be his everything. To the one who was out of control, God promised to be his future and his hope. And then Jacob woke up. And I would share with you that Jacob's words tell us that he was powerfully and forever changed because of this nighttime encounter with God. The words that God spoke as heaven came to earth and God was with him. And he heard God's promise to keep and provide and protect and guaranteed him a future. He said, wow. When I went to bed here, I didn't even know there was a God. And guess what? This is the place where God lives. He becomes a man of faith. And he says, and when you've done it, I will worship you here. Not if. When. When you have done what you've told me, I will worship you here. By the way, as I was continuing to prepare this morning, I flipped back through the book. Guess what I find later on in Genesis? Guess where Jacob worships? Right here at Bethel. The place before this night had no name. Jacob calls Bethel, and he puts the stone pillow there as a reminder of the promise of God with him, caring for him, keeping him, guaranteeing him a future. He left changed. He left trusting that God would do as he said he would do. What circumstances do you find yourself in that cause you to wonder or to wander? What circumstances do you find yourself in that cause you to fear or flee? Perhaps this morning you find yourself in an unexpected place. A place that feels every bit as wilderness as the desert in which Jacob found himself. You find yourself wandering that wild place, wondering if God even cares. The good news is God's already there. Because heaven has come down in Christ Jesus. The one who is our Savior, whose name is God with us, he is already there. In fact, he went into the wilderness ahead of you, preparing the way, so he can meet you there, so he can keep you, so he can guarantee your future there. Perhaps this morning you feel like you're an unexpected person, kind of like Jacob. God could never work through you. If only he knew all that you've done, all the ways you failed. If only he knew how weak you are. He would turn his back on you and leave you sitting on a rock in the wilderness. The good news is, God is already there too. God shows up of his own accord, of his own will, to bring peace and hope. God shows up to bring deliverance, to guarantee his promise of your salvation and your hope. Here's why I believe today is no coincidence. When I got to my study this morning, I opened up my devotional. I'm working with and through Oswald Chambers, My Utmost for His Highest. And you know me by now to know I don't believe in coincidence. I want you to hear the words that I read this morning as I was preparing to come to the pulpit. It actually happens to be today's devotional, July 20th. The scripture passage is from Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. Those who wait on the Lord will walk and not faint. Having the reality of God's presence is not dependent on our being in a particular circumstance or place, but is only dependent on our determination to keep the Lord before us continually. Our problems arise when we refuse to place our trust in the reality of his presence. The experience of the psalmist speaks of, we will not fear even though. that will be ours when we're grounded on the truth of the reality of God's presence. Not just a simple awareness of it, because after all, anybody can say, well, I'm aware of God's presence. Not just a simple awareness of it, but an understanding of the reality of His presence. Then we will exclaim, He has been here all the time. At critical moments in our lives, it is necessary to ask God for guidance. But it should be unnecessary to be constantly saying, oh Lord, direct me in this or in that. Of course He will. And in fact, He is doing it already. If our everyday decisions are not according to His will, He will press through them, bringing restraint to our spirit. Then we must be quiet and wait for the direction of His purpose. You see, the words that God spoke to Jacob in the wilderness are His words to us today. It's what Paul was saying in Romans chapter 8. Those great words of hope that remind us that though we are walking through this life and our bodies are literally dying every day, yet God, because He is with us. Though we wonder which way we might turn, He is keeping us. And though we might be afraid of what tomorrow may hold, we know that He guarantees our future for those who trust in Him. That's His word for you this morning. And as much as I wish you had a switch that I could flip to turn that faith on, you don't. That is your decision. You hear the words of the Lord this morning. God saying to you, I am with you. God saying to you, I will keep you. God saying to you, I will do what I have promised. They are His words